This is Community Unity Now, the D Tycoon Show. This is Bill Morton, President of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, my co-host, and I am Trudy Leong, Administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Our very special guest today is Daniel Steven Kleinman. He is running for member of the City of Chicago Board of Education. Welcome, Daniel. How are you today?
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Good. So glad to have you here.
Thank you so much.
First of all, tell us what does the elected board member do for the Board of Education, City of Chicago?
Yes. Thank you so much for the question. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this because this is actually the first time that Chicago will be voting on the Board of Education members. And the roles of the Board of Education will remain much as they are, with the one key difference that they will now be accountable to the voters of the City of Chicago. The responsibilities are just as they are now. There's over 600 schools and over 300,000 students in the care of CPS. They range, and that means that the Board of Education has to be in charge of the funding that comes from the state, the federal, city incomes, and works on the administration of all those schools. That includes the charter schools of CPS too, not just neighborhood schools. This is the entire city. And I think that's why it's so significant that for the first time it is up as elected positions, because these are the students of the city. This is quite literally the future of Chicago. And it has been decades of that future being left in the hands of education special interest parties. So it's very significant, and I'm just thrilled to be playing this small part in it.
Now, I know many of us have been fighting with the City of Chicago for an elected school board for over at least a decade, and you included. So it used to be appointed by the principal. Is that correct?
No. Well, and to be fair, I know of the fight more than a decade. I know that I stand on the shoulders of giants that have been involved in the fight. I started, I guess, at the introduction when Mayor Rahm Emanuel took office. There have been people in the fight since Mayor Daley. And all the respect and credit needs to be given where due in establishing what has become the law for the elected Board of Education. Up before it has been mayoral appointed.
Okay.
As actually we just saw, our new mayor appointed new members, and that's kind of how the board has run, and that is currently how it's still run until 2024. When the election will be held.
So your responsibilities as elected school board, tell us about the responsibilities.
Yeah, like I said, a good example of the responsibilities of the Board of Education that comes from the fiscal responsibilities. A good example of it lapsing is in the fact that CPS had to repay the state of Illinois millions of dollars in student funding because of an accounting error that CPS made. And it costs students resources. It's things like that where it's just, I will come in with a platform that addresses what I think is CPS's root concern right now, and that's one of legitimacy. Chicagoans need to feel that Chicago Public Schools as a district is the legitimate best choice to send any student of Chicago to receive the best education available.
Now, Chicago Public School students, it's going around quite a bit, and we've seen examples of this, where citizens who are even adults in the city of Chicago are illiterate, cannot do their own finance. Tell us how this position is going to help with that.
I think that's great. I think that's great because to me, the beauty of this and one of the richest opportunities in this being the first election is that we have the opportunity to shape what this can be. In my mind, the Board of Education should focus its efforts on empowering local school councils to make the individual decisions per school that will address the individual needs per student. That goes, from pre-K all the way to the end of high school. You have to start identifying at what age do students begin to lag behind the reading curve. You then need to provide the resources to address that. It's one thing to say you're offering the standardized test that say, oh, by the third grade we're starting to fall behind, yet not provide the resources to do anything about it. It's a whole other thing to approach it holistically when you're talking with teachers about things that, they say beyond just the books. They talk about wraparound services that really meet students where they are and getting the needs they need so that in the classroom, when they're learning to read, they're able to put their best foot forward.
Have you been able to get the contact information for the current appointed members so that you could speak with them?
I've reached out to congratulate the members, and I'm very confident in their capabilities, their capacities. They actually all come from local school council experience as well. I believe several of them have a history as educators. I have not tried to take any special privilege and reach out to get a meeting, in some capacity. But I look forward to participating in continue the public discourse with new board members now. Yeah.
Do you have anybody mentoring you now about the position?
Yeah, I will actually say I have a lot of mentors. I started the campaign with just kind of a personal goal that I wanted to represent an idea. I know when I went to elementary school, I had a great time, and I really enjoyed learning. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed being in classrooms. I enjoyed being with my fellow peers and fellow students. And high school got very difficult. Increasingly so. And it wasn't far past my sophomore year where dropping out became a very real likelihood. And I learned from that age, having the high school put me in heavily resourced, provided classrooms, I learned what a difference a well-resourced school could make in a student's life. And I started this campaign by simply sharing that story, by saying that, look, statistically, somebody with my disability is bipolar disorder type 1, we often will drop out of school. It's accomplishing graduating high school is something that young people with my disability struggle with. And I don't think I would have gotten into college without the extra resources that my high school was able to provide. And I've been open about that. And I've said simply, why doesn't every high school have that ability? Why doesn't every student who wants to learn get the resources that I got. And when I started sharing that story, community members that I trust as mentors have begun to respond, and they've begun to reach out with good advice.
Did your mentors say how those resources are allocated? For instance, what kind of resources are you talking about? And you see that those resources were shared with your school, but you maybe did some research and you saw that other schools in like the more marginalized neighborhoods, they don't get those resources, right? Is that what you mean?
Here's a perfect example. I think you're entirely right. A perfect example is, again, in the high school, I was offered to be to attend a course, Student Services 101, something like that, where there was a teacher, two student resource teachers, and every other day there were additional social worker trained staff that would come in, and on a weekly basis I would have a meeting with a case manager provided by the high school, and it were those types of resources that got me to be able to get into college. And I know for a fact that there's resources like those that are lacking. At the local school council that I served on for 2 terms at Walt Disney Magnet, I was really proud to be the one who made the motion to hire a new social worker. And it was because of those life experiences that I really wanted to be a part of that motion and that hire, because that position didn't exist before.
Were you able to get some data as to like the graduation rate before the social worker arrived, and then after the social worker arrived, did that help improve the graduation rate and the college entry rate?
I think that's phenomenal. I know people ask that question. I haven't seen the details on Disney since the last since I served, but that is something that it would be fascinating to see. I know, from what I've read, that is what I believe is the outcome. You saw it when Rahm Emanuel closed the 50 schools. The schools that he deemed struggling and underperforming and underutilized were also schools that had already been starved of like librarians and nurses and social workers like that and counselors. So I don't think there's any debate left in the benefit of these resources. I think what's missing is the will.
So what you plan to do as a board member is to fight for those schools that are starved for resources, such as in the poor neighborhoods, and then so that they could have a matching resources, at least as matching as possible. It'll be a struggle, right?
Yeah, so the CPS elected Board of Education will be based on districts. The city will be cut into districts, 10 of them at first. But I do believe, and I will make the argument that even if there's 10 or 20 districts, there's one CPS, and there's one student body of Chicago. And regardless of if you're representing parents and teachers on the south side, or parents and teachers on the west side, or parents and teachers on the north side, we're all doing our best to serve the students of Chicago. And, I think it can easily be said, if we're allowing, even one student to fail with knowing that we could have done something differently, then that's our mandate.
So just to recap here, CPS has 600 schools, 300,000 students, and plus charter schools as well. And right now there may be 10 districts possibly, but it's not set yet. And your region is in Edgewater, Rogers Park, maybe?
Yeah, great. Well, so that's one thing we do know. There's 10 districts. And then eventually there will be 20. We know those two things. We don't know much else. There have been maps that have been proposed for the 10 districts for the 2024 election. There have been a lot of proposals, and some have received varying levels of support. I live in Edgewater. I love my neighborhood. I've lived in multiple neighborhoods, and I've traveled all throughout the city, and I love Chicago. The district, I imagine, will include Edgewater. I've seen maps that include Edgewater, Uptown, and Rogers Park. I've seen maps that include West Ridge in there. I think I saw one that included North Center in there.
Do you know who is going to make the final decision as to what the maps are going to be?
Yes, the final decision of the map is the state of Illinois, the General Assembly. Yeah, and they've been doing their diligence in working to gather community feedback. Some of the maps I've named are community drawn maps, independently drawn, independently submitted maps.
Any idea about when that decision will be made at all?
No. I do not know when the map will be released. I know that it is many months late. I think they know that too.
Oh, they already passed the deadline, you mean?
I personally feel like it's a disservice to leave the maps out so long. I mean, there may be other individuals who are weighing whether or not to run. And they may be in another part of the city where they want to see, what school they may be drawn in with. And I think that's a disservice to keep them on the sidelines when they could be doing what I'm doing, which is campaigning and talking and meeting with voters. I think other Board of Education candidates or those interested in being Board of Education candidates should feel comfortable to do so. And I think the state assembly is keeping them at bay, unfortunately.
Is there anything else that must be decided besides the maps before this election is all ready to go?
That's a good question. Well, I know, there are some discussions based on, people are trying to talk about who will be eligible to vote and run. I don't know the legal limitations of that. I'm kind of, as a candidate, I'm going to do what I'm told.
But you're on the far north side.
Yeah.
Your heart is for the city of Chicago students, and you are running.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I mean, I know somebody asked me kind of bluntly. They just said well, you don't even know who you'll represent. If the map's not drawn yet, and I didn't bat an eye. I'll represent Chicago. My precinct will be in the district, and I'll be in that precinct. So, however the district is drawn, I know I'll be in one.
However it shakes out, you'll do the best job you can
Yes.
to represent the students.
Yes, exactly.
How did you learn about this position? Were you part of the struggle to make this position come to fruition that is an elected board position?
Like I said, there are so many people who've been involved in this fight for so long. I got involved specifically in the education fight right when Rahm Emanuel decided he was going to run for mayor. It was I think 2 weeks before he left the White House. I decided that I was going to work for an education candidate running for mayor named Miguel Del Valle, who became president of CPS under Lori Lightfoot. And Rahm Emanuel won and very quickly went about his agenda that included closing schools. And I became part of an organization on the West Side and South Side organizing called Action Now. And Action Now is a wonderful nonprofit that has instilled in me, just values of knowing how not to give up on a social justice fight. And so I became involved with that organization, and that year the teachers went on strike. We marched with them. I marched with them several times. And over the years I just became more and more involved in the education effort, the education justice effort of Chicago. One of my most proud education victories is actually in a scholarship program. It was called Grow Your Own Teachers Illinois. Grow Your Own is a program that provides scholarships for students to return to school to get their teacher's certificate. So students from Chicago can come back and teach in Chicago. And so ever since then, I've kind of just been very...
Was that funds that people donated, or was it some funds that they Action Now acquired from some entity for the scholarships?
It was money that we won through the state of Illinois. It was a allocation, an appropriations bill that went through the Illinois House, concurred by the Illinois Senate, and it was part of the Illinois budget.
Do you think that for the schools to get the resources that they need, especially the schools that are struggling, do you think accountability for funds that they already have is more important, or to get more funding, or a balance between the two?
I think it is a balance between the two, but I think there's also one thing that in the funding debate can easily be looked over, and that's the funding formula. And I think CPS is going in a positive direction in moving towards a funding formula that focuses on a school's needs. So, for example, CPS has followed a function where a dollar value is tied to a student. And so where the student goes, that dollar value will follow. This, of course, causes the dilemma with charter schools, because a charter school will siphon off students, which is literally siphoning off
funding
dollars.
for CPS
funding
students.
for CPS students. But what that also means is that there may be a school that has fewer students for whatever reason, but those students may actually have more needs.
Daniel, we are 20 seconds to the end of our program. Do you want to leave some contact information for our listeners to contact you if they have more questions?
please visit votedanielforchicago.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today at the Community Unity Now. This is Bill Morton. I am Trudy Leong, and this is Daniel Kleinman. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great evening.